The doorbell pierced the midnight silence during the fiercest storm Boston had seen in decades. Jonathan Hayes found himself staring at a soaking 9-year-old girl cradling a bundle against her chest, her emerald eyes hauntingly familiar as she spoke. "I'll wash your dishes for food for my brother." Before we get into the topic, if this video reached you at the right moment, let us know with a simple comment. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more content that connects with you. Thunder crashed as Jonathan Hayes stood frozen in his doorway, rain pelting his marble entrance as he stared at the child before him. She couldn't be more than 9, soaked to the bone, with a determination in her eyes that seemed impossibly adult. In her arms, wrapped in what appeared to be a tattered kitchen towel, was a whimpering infant. "I'll wash your dishes for food for my brother," she repeated louder against the howling wind. "He hasn't eaten since morning." Jonathan, still in his tailored suit after a late charity gala, found himself speechless. In 20 years of building his fortune, nothing had prepared him for this. "Come inside," he finally managed. "You're freezing." The girl hesitated. "I don't want charity, I can work." "It's not charity to get out of a storm, please." She stepped cautiously into his foyer, leaving small puddles on imported marble. "I'm Sarah," she said. "This is Michael. He's 10 months old." Jonathan knelt to her level, noticing the baby's flushed cheeks. "I'm Jonathan. Let's get you warm first, then we'll talk about food." He led them to his kitchen and returned with plush towels and a throw blanket. Sarah dried her brother with practiced movements. It was only when she glanced up that Jonathan felt a jolt of recognition. Her eyes, green like summer leaves, with a distinctive gold fleck in the right iris. He'd seen those eyes before. "Is there milk?" Sarah asked. "For Michael." Jonathan snapped back to present. "Yes, of course." He moved to his refrigerator. "I have fruit, cheese, bread. Take whatever you need." As he gathered food, his mind raced. Those eyes were unique. He'd only seen them on one other person. Emily Winters. His college sweetheart who vanished 20 years ago, leaving only a brief note. "I can't do this anymore. Don't try to find me." He'd respected her wishes despite his broken heart. Now, watching this child feed her brother, Jonathan felt past colliding with present. "Where are your parents?" he asked gently. Her small shoulders stiffened. "Mum's at the hospital. She gets treatments. We were staying with Mrs. Henley downstairs, but she had to go to her sister's." "And your father?" "Don't have one," she replied matter-of-factly. Jonathan pulled out his phone. "What's your mom's name?" Sarah looked up suspiciously. "Emily Carter. Are you calling people to take us away?" "Emily." The name hit him like a physical blow. "No," he assured her, "but I should call the hospital, let them know you're safe." Sarah's face crumpled slightly. "They won't let us see her tonight anyway." Jonathan made a decision that would change all their lives. "You'll stay here tonight. In the morning, we'll go see your mom together." Sarah studied him skeptically. "Why would you help us? Rich people don't just help." The comment stung with its innocent cynicism. "Some do," he said softly. "Sometimes people help because they remember what it was like to need help." She nodded once. "I still want to wash your dishes. We don't take handouts." "Oh, how about this? You can help me make breakfast in the morning. That's a fair trade." She extended her small hand formally. "Deal." While Sarah finished eating, he prepared the guest room, mind whirling with possibilities. If Emily Carter was Emily Winters, what had happened 20 years ago? As he helped settle the children, Sarah already half asleep, while protectively curled around her brother, Jonathan made another decision. Tomorrow, he would find answers. "Good night, Sarah," he whispered. "Good night, Mr. Hayes," came her drowsy reply. "Thank you for not being like the other rich people." He closed the door quietly, her words echoing in his mind as the storm raged outside. Morning arrived with gentle sunlight replacing the night's fury. Jonathan had barely slept, his mind consumed with questions. After checking on the still sleeping children, he began making calls. First to his assistant, "Cancel everything today. Family emergency." Next to his private investigator, "I need everything on an Emily Carter, Boston area. 2 children named Sarah and Michael." Finally, to his personal physician, "I may need a favor at Boston Memorial today." D. By the time Sarah emerged, sleepily holding Michael, Jonathan had prepared breakfast, his first attempt at cooking in years. "You made pancakes?" Sarah asked, eyes widening at the misshapen results. "Tried to," Jonathan smiled, "though I think they're more like pancake-adjacent food objects." This earned him a small giggle, the first childlike sound he'd heard from her. "I can help fix them," she offered, settling Michael in a makeshift high chair. With practiced ease, Sarah took over the kitchen, showing him how to properly mix batter and flip. "Where did you learn to cook?" he asked. "Mom taught me before she got sick," Sarah replied. "She said everyone should know how to make at least 3 good meals." "What's wrong with your mom?" Sarah's hand stilled momentarily. "Cancer, the bad kind that moves around. It started in her breast, but now it's in more places." Jonathan felt his throat tighten. "I'm sorry, Sarah." She shrugged with forced casualness. "We're used to it. Mom says we're fighters." While they ate, Jonathan's phone buzzed. The investigator had information. Emily Carter, 39, single mother, stage 4 metastatic breast cancer, former maiden name Winters, children Sarah, 9, and Michael, 10 months. Current residence, apartment 3B, 1471 Westwood Street. Eviction notice filed yesterday. His hand trembled. It was his Emily, and she was dying. "Ready to see your mom?" he asked with forced composure. Sarah nodded eagerly, already cleaning up. The drive to Boston Memorial was silent. What would he say to Emily? Did she know Sarah had shown up at his door? At the oncology floor, Sarah navigated the hallways with familiar ease, nodding to nurses who recognized her. "Morning, Sarah," a nurse called. "You're early today." "We got a ride," Sarah replied, gesturing to Jonathan. "Is Mom awake?" "Just finished her morning labs. She was asking for you." As they approached room 412, Jonathan felt his heart hammering. 20 years dissolved when Sarah pushed open the door. And there she was, thinner, paler, with closely cropped hair, but unmistakably Emily. His Emily. "Sarah, baby!" Emily's face lit up, then registered confusion as Jonathan appeared. Recognition was immediate, her face draining of color. "Jonathan?" "Mommy, this is Mr. Hayes," Sarah explained. "He let us stay at his house during the storm because Mrs. Henley went away." Emily's eyes, identical to her daughter's, locked with Jonathan's in a silent explosion of questions. "Sarah," a nurse called from the doorway, "could you help me? We got those special juice boxes Michael likes." The nurse extracted the children, leaving Jonathan and Emily alone. "How did they find you?" Emily whispered. "They didn't. Sarah showed up at my door during the storm, offering to wash dishes for food." He swallowed hard. "Complete coincidence. I recognized her eyes, your eyes." Emily closed those eyes now, tears escaping. "She's resourceful. Too resourceful sometimes." "Emily, what happened? 20 years ago. You just disappeared." Her eyes opened, confusion evident. "I disappeared? You were the one who never answered any of my letters, calls. Even when I begged your father to let me speak to you." It was Jonathan's turn to look confused. "What letters? My father told me you left a note saying you wanted nothing more to do with me." Emily's face transformed with understanding, followed by bitter resignation. "Of course, your father. Emily, I never got any messages from you, never." "Would have what, Jonathan? Chosen the pregnant scholarship girl over Harvard Law and your family empire." The words hung between them. The missing piece finally revealed. "Pregnant," he whispered. His gaze moved to the door where Sarah had disappeared. Sarah is your daughter, Emily confirmed quietly, though she doesn't know. Jonathan sank into the chair beside her bed, and Michael, a shadow crossed Emily's face. Michael's father isn't in the picture. Different mistake, different time. There are other treatments, clinical trials, not with my insurance, not anymore. Her voice held no self-pity, just stark reality. I've made arrangements for the children. My cousin in Chicago. No, Jonathan interrupted. They're staying with me. Sarah is my daughter. You can't just decide that after 9 years, Emily protested weakly. Watch me, he replied, reaching for her thin hand. I never knew. I would have been there if I'd known. 3 days later, Emily and the children were settled in Jonathan's estate. He had converted his east wing into a private medical suite with equipment that rivaled the hospital's oncology ward. Dr. Abernathy, Jonathan's personal physician, had taken over Emily's care, consulting with top oncologists worldwide. The prognosis remained grim, but at least now there were options beyond palliative care. The Swedish trial shows promise, Dr. Abernathy explained during a private consultation. But Emily's case is advanced. Even with immediate intervention, we're talking about extending time, not necessarily a cure. Whatever it costs, whatever it takes, Jonathan replied, determination evident. Sarah had adapted to their new living arrangement with cautious optimism, still insisting on helping with chores, but occasionally acting her age, especially around Winston, the elderly groundskeeper who taught her about the garden. Michael thrived with proper nutrition and new surroundings. Jonathan found himself increasingly drawn to the infant, who bore no biological connection to him, but whose innocent smile had claimed territory in his heart. The most complex relationship remained between Jonathan and Emily. 20 years of separation couldn't be bridged in mere days. That tentative peace was shattered when Emily found Jonathan in his study, surrounded by photocopied letters. "What are these?" she asked, though her expression suggested she already knew. Jonathan looked up, his face haggard. "Your letters. All 20 years' worth. My father's assistant found them in a locked file in his private safe." He held up one particular page, this one where you told me you were pregnant. Emily leaned against the doorframe, suddenly looking every bit as ill as she was. "You really never saw them?" "No, and I never wrote the cruel responses he sent you using my name." Emily slowly crossed the room, lowering herself into the chair opposite him. Why would he go to such lengths? Power, control. Jonathan's laugh was bitter. The great Richard Hayes couldn't have his heir trapped by an unsuitable match. The conversation was interrupted by a soft knock. Sarah stood in the doorway, wearing new pajamas that still looked strange against her solemn expression. "Michael's asleep," she reported, "and Mom needs her evening medicine." Jonathan checked his watch, startled by how late it had become. "Thank you for reminding us." As Emily rose to return to her suite, Sarah remained, her gaze fixed on the scattered letters. "Are those from my mum to you?" The adults exchanged glances, realizing the moment of truth had arrived sooner than anticipated. "Yes," Jonathan answered honestly. "From a long time ago." "Were you friends before I was born?" Emily moved to her daughter, kneeling despite her weakness. "We were more than friends, sweetheart. Jonathan and I loved each other very much in college." Sarah processed this, visibly connecting dots. "Is that why his eyes are like mine?" "Yes," Emily confirmed. "Jonathan is your father, Sarah." The girl's reaction wasn't what either expected. Rather than shock or tears, she simply nodded. "I thought so." "You have the same forehead wrinkle when you're thinking hard." She looked between them. "Why didn't you tell me before?" Jonathan knelt beside Emily. "It's complicated, Sarah. I didn't know about you until now. There was a misunderstanding. His dad hid Mom's letters," Sarah stated matter-of-factly. "I heard you talking yesterday." "Sarah, you shouldn't eavesdrop," Emily began. "It's okay," Jonathan interjected. "You're right, Sarah. My father kept your mother's letters from me. If I had known about you, I would have been part of your life from the beginning." Sarah considered this. "Is he mean? Your dad?" "He thought he was protecting me," Jonathan answered carefully. "But yes, what he did was mean and wrong." "Are you going to yell at him?" Despite the gravity of the moment, Jonathan found himself smiling at her directness. "I'm going to do more than yell, but that's for me to handle." Sarah nodded, apparently satisfied. Then she asked the question that revealed her true concern. "Now that you know you're my dad, do you want me to call you Dad?" The question pierced Jonathan's heart. "Only if and when you're ready." "And are you going to make Mom better?" Emily reached for her daughter's hand. "Sweetheart, we've talked about this. Sometimes even with the best doctors." "Yes," Jonathan interrupted. "I'm doing everything possible to help your mom get better." The coming weeks established new rhythms in the Hayes mansion. Emily began an aggressive treatment protocol combining standard chemotherapy with experimental Swedish immunotherapy. Jonathan transformed his home office into a command center for both Hayes Industries and Emily's medical care. Most significantly, Jonathan and Sarah developed a tentative father-daughter relationship. She still called him Jonathan, but sought him out for help with homework or simply to sit in comfortable silence while he worked. The fragile domestic peace was disrupted when Dr. Abernathy requested an urgent private meeting. "We've identified something concerning in Emily's latest genomic sequencing," the physician explained. "Her cancer has a rare genetic marker that's not responding to the current protocol." Jonathan studied the data. "What are our options?" "There's a trial at Memorial Sloan Kettering targeting exactly this marker, but Emily's been rejected twice already. Their criteria exclude patients with metastasis to multiple organs." Jonathan's jaw tightened. "What if I made a significant donation?" Dr. Abernathy looked uncomfortable. "Jonathan, even with your resources, there are medical ethics involved." "Then we create our own trial," Jonathan decided. "We'll hire their lead researcher if necessary." "That would cost millions with no guarantee." "I don't care," Jonathan interrupted. "Make it happen." What neither man realized was that Sarah stood frozen outside the office door, processing everything she'd overheard. That evening, after Emily had fallen asleep, Sarah found Jonathan in the garden gazebo. "Mum's not getting better, is she?" Sarah asked without preamble. Jonathan set aside his tablet, choosing honesty over false reassurance. "The current treatment isn't working as well as we hoped, but we're exploring new options." Sarah nodded, unsurprised. "I heard you talking to Dr. Abernathy. You want to make a special medicine just for Mom." Rather than admonishing her for eavesdropping, Jonathan simply confirmed yes. "Will it work?" "I don't know," he admitted. "But we have to try." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Mom told me once that sometimes loving someone means being brave enough to say goodbye." The simple statement hit Jonathan with unexpected force. "But you don't want to say goodbye," Sarah observed. "You just found her again." "I just found all of you," Jonathan corrected gently. Sarah considered this, then asked her deepest fear, "If Mom dies, will you still want me and Michael?" Jonathan turned fully toward his daughter, ensuring she could see the absolute truth in his eyes. "Sarah, listen to me. You are my daughter. Nothing will ever change that. And Michael is part of our family now, too. Whatever happens with your mother's health, you and Michael will always have a home with me." "Promise," she whispered, suddenly looking her actual age, a vulnerable 9-year-old. "I promise." Jonathan hesitated, then added, "I've already begun the legal process to formally establish my paternity and to become Michael's legal guardian." Sarah absorbed this information. "So you'd be Michael's dad too?" "Yes, if that's something you both would want." For the first time, Sarah initiated physical contact, leaning against Jonathan's side. I think Michael would like having a dad. He's never had one. Jonathan put his arm around her small shoulders, heart swelling when she didn't pull away. I missed 9 years of being your father, Sarah. I don't want to miss another day. Later that night, after escorting Sarah to bed, Jonathan found Emily awake, reviewing her own test results. You should be resting, he admonished gently. Hard to rest when you're planning to spend millions on a treatment that might extend my life by months at best, Emily replied. Sarah told me about your conversation. Jonathan sat on the edge of her bed. That child doesn't miss anything. Never has, Emily agreed with maternal pride. Jonathan, about this personalized treatment approach, it's already in motion, he interrupted. The research team assembles next week. Emily reached for his hand. You can't buy miracles, Jonathan. Watch me try, he replied, his voice low with intensity. Emily studied his face, her expression softening. You still love me. After all this time, after everything. It wasn't a question, but Jonathan answered anyway. I never stopped. Not even when I thought you'd chosen to leave. And if your miracle treatment fails, if I die anyway, then I'll have done everything humanly possible, he said firmly. And I'll raise our children to know how extraordinary their mother was. The next morning brought chaos. Jonathan awoke to urgent calls from his executive team. Overnight, confidential medical research files had been leaked to the press, along with allegations that Hayes Industries was diverting shareholder resources to fund experimental treatments for the CEO's secret family. Hayes Industries stock plummeted 15% before trading opened. The board demanded an emergency meeting, and Jonathan's phone buzzed constantly. We need to issue a statement immediately, his communications director insisted. Draft something factual but minimal, Jonathan directed. Confirm that I'm supporting medical research as a private individual, not corporate funds. He ended the call, already knowing the source of the leak. His father had always favored scorched earth tactics. More concerning was protecting Emily and the children from the media frenzy. Reporters gathered at the estate gates, and security reported multiple attempts to breach the perimeter, including a drone intercepted over Emily's medical suite. You've seen the news, Jonathan stated, noting Emily's grim expression. Hard to miss when helicopters are circling, she replied. This is your father's doing. Sarah, ever vigilant, asked the question adults were avoiding. Why is Jonathan's dad doing this? Jonathan knelt to her level. It's because he doesn't like losing control, Sarah. Not because of anything you or Michael have done. He's a bully, Sarah declared with straightforward moral clarity. My teacher says bullies want to make you scared so they can feel big. Despite the situation, Jonathan smiled. Your teacher is very wise. Emily's tablet chimed, Dr. Abernathy requesting an urgent consultation. Sarah took Michael to the adjoining room to give the adults privacy. I've reviewed the latest blood work, Dr. Abernathy began. There's something unusual in the markers we've been tracking. Emily and Jonathan exchanged concerned glances. Unusual how? The cancer markers should be stable or increasing given the aggressive nature of your condition, the doctor explained. Instead, we're seeing a 15% decrease since starting the combined therapy. That's good news, Jonathan ventured cautiously. Potentially very good news. Dr. Abernathy confirmed. The Swedish team wants daily monitoring to confirm it's not an anomaly. After the call ended, Jonathan found himself torn between hope for Emily and the crisis engulfing his company. Go handle your father's mess, she urged. We'll be fine here. The boardroom atmosphere was frigid when Jonathan arrived. His father sat at the far end, a deliberate breach of protocol since he'd officially stepped down as chairman. Let's address the situation directly, Jonathan began. Yes, I am supporting medical research that may benefit Emily Carter. Yes, Sarah Carter is my biological daughter, a fact I discovered only recently. These personal matters have no bearing on Hayes Industries' operations. Your personal matters have cost shareholders billions, one director countered. My personal finances are separate from corporate resources, Jonathan replied evenly. Richard Hayes cleared his throat. While my son's personal choices are his own, his ability to lead this company, while distracted by such complicated family matters, must be questioned. I move that Jonathan Hayes take a leave of absence, proposed the Audit Committee chair, another of Richard's allies. Jonathan had anticipated this. Before we vote, I'd like to present evidence. He distributed folders to each director. These documents show that last night's leak originated from an IP address registered to my father's personal assistant. The boardroom erupted in shocked murmurs. This is absurd, Richard blustered, but his confident facade had cracked. By late afternoon, Richard Hayes had been formally censured by the board, while Jonathan received a vote of confidence to continue as CEO. As the boardroom emptied, father and son remained. You've won this round, Richard acknowledged coldly. But ask yourself, is she worth destroying our family legacy? Our legacy, Jonathan repeated incredulously. You've spent my entire life talking about legacy while systematically destroying what actually matters. As Jonathan drove home, mentally exhausted from the corporate battle, his phone rang with Dr. Abernathy's distinctive tone. Jonathan, the physician's voice carried an urgency that immediately set off alarms. You need to come home immediately. There's been a development with Emily. Is she worse? Jonathan demanded, already accelerating. No, Dr. Abernathy replied, his tone shifting to something approaching wonder. Quite the opposite. The latest scans show tumor reduction across all sites. It's unprecedented for her cancer type and stage. What does it mean? I'm not certain yet, the doctor admitted. But there's something else, something in Michael's medical records that Emily just shared with me, something that might explain everything. Jonathan nearly swerved off the road. What is it? I think you need to hear the rest from Emily herself. The drive home passed in a blur. When Jonathan arrived, he found Emily sitting up in bed looking stronger than she had in weeks. You should have told me, Jonathan said without preamble. Emily nodded, accepting his frustration. I was afraid you wouldn't believe me, afraid of giving you or myself false hope. Tell me now, he urged, everything. Emily took a deep breath. Michael isn't just any baby, Jonathan. He's yours, our son. The statement hung in the air, seemingly impossible. That's not possible, Jonathan said carefully. We haven't been together since college. Michael is 10 months old. 11 months next week, Emily corrected, and he was conceived using preserved embryos from 20 years ago. Jonathan stared at her, struggling to process this revelation. We never created embryos. Not intentionally, Emily agreed. But do you remember participating in that fertility study during our senior year, the one that paid research subjects? The memories surfaced slowly. They had needed money for textbooks and had participated in several medical studies. Vaguely, but that was just blood draws and questionnaires. And specimens, Emily added gently. They were creating and studying embryos from volunteer couples, then preserving them for future fertility research. Dr. Abernathy interjected, the Boston University Fertility Preservation Project. It was groundbreaking research at the time. Jonathan looked at Michael with new understanding. But why? How did you end up using our preserved embryo? Emily's expression clouded. When my cancer was first diagnosed 2 years ago, doctors warned treatment would likely leave me infertile. I always wanted another child, a sibling for Sarah. I remembered the study and contacted the research hospital. They still had our embryos after 20 years. 3 of them, Emily confirmed. "Still viable thanks to their preservation techniques. Since I was an original participant, they offered me the opportunity to use one before beginning cancer treatment. Without contacting me." Jonathan couldn't keep the hurt from his voice. "I tried," Emily said quietly. "I called Hayes Industries, sent certified letters, all returned or unanswered. Your father's interference again." Jonathan turned to Dr. Abernathy. "And how does this connect to Emily's improving condition?" "I have a theory," the physician replied. "The immunotherapy we're using works by teaching the body to recognize and attack cancer cells. Michael's existence, a child conceived from embryos created before Emily's cancer developed, may have inadvertently created a natural immunotherapy effect." "You're saying our son is actually helping cure Emily's cancer?" Jonathan clarified, astonished. "It's a working theory," Dr. Abernathy cautioned. "But the timing of her improvement correlates with what we'd expect if this mechanism were active." Sarah, who had been listening intently, spoke up. "So Michael is like Mom's medicine. That's why she's getting better." Dr. Abernathy smiled at her. "Something like that, Sarah. Your brother is very special." "I always knew that," Sarah declared confidently. "He's extra special." Jonathan watched his children, the daughter he'd missed knowing for 9 years, and the son he hadn't known existed until moments ago, with profound wonder. Against impossible odds, his family had found its way back together. What remained unclear was how his father would react to this latest development, and what final moves Richard Hayes might make in his desperate attempt to maintain control over the Hayes legacy. The revelation about Michael's origins created a seismic shift in the household. Jonathan found himself watching the infant with new eyes, noticing similarities he'd previously dismissed: the slight dimple in his left cheek, the determined set of his jaw when frustrated, the way his eyebrows furrowed in concentration, all Hayes family traits that now made perfect sense. Emily's improvement continued at a rate that astounded her medical team. Dr. Abernathy assembled specialists to document what appeared to be a medical breakthrough: the possibility that fetal cells from Michael remaining in Emily's system were functioning as a form of targeted immunotherapy against her cancer. "We need to proceed cautiously," Dr. Abernathy warned during a team meeting. "This phenomenon requires thorough documentation before we make any claims publicly." "Will this help other cancer patients?" Sarah asked, having insisted on joining what she called the Get Mom Better meetings. Dr. Abernathy smiled at her. "That's exactly what we hope to discover, Sarah. Your mother and brother might help thousands of people someday." While Emily's health improved, Richard Hayes remained an unpredictable threat. Jonathan increased security at the estate and assigned bodyguards to accompany Sarah to school. The girl complained about the attention, but understood its necessity after a reporter had attempted to interview her during recess. "Your grandfather won't stop," Jonathan explained one evening as he helped Sarah with her science homework. "He believes he's protecting our family legacy." Sarah looked up from her textbook. "What's a legacy?" "It's what you leave behind," Jonathan explained. "The things people remember about you after you're gone." Sarah considered this with her characteristic thoughtfulness. "Then Grandpa has a bad legacy. People will remember he was mean." "It's more complicated than that," Jonathan sighed. "He built a company that helps millions, created jobs, funded hospitals. But he hurt his own family," Sarah countered with 9-year-old certainty. "That's the worst thing." Jonathan couldn't argue with her simple wisdom. Their conversation was interrupted by Michael's delighted squeal from the doorway. Emily stood there holding him, looking stronger than she had in months. "Should you be carrying him?" Jonathan asked, rising quickly. Emily rolled her eyes. "I'm not made of glass, Jonathan. Dr. Abernathy says moderate activity is good for me." She set Michael down, watching proudly as he crawled rapidly toward his sister. Still, you shouldn't overdo it, Jonathan cautioned. Says the man who worked 36 hours straight last week, Emily countered. We need to talk about the media situation. Dr. Abernathy's concerned about the attention Michael's case is generating in medical circles. Indeed, despite efforts to maintain privacy, rumors had begun circulating about a miraculous cancer remission linked to an infant's stem cells. Medical journals were requesting interviews, and pharmaceutical companies had approached Hayes Industries about research partnerships. We need to control the narrative, Jonathan agreed. But our priority remains your health and the children's safety. Emily sat beside him, watching Sarah help Michael stack colored blocks. I never imagined this, she admitted softly. A month ago, I was planning for the children's lives without me. Now we plan for their lives with you, Jonathan completed. Emily turned to him, her gaze direct as always. Jonathan, what happens when I'm fully recovered? We haven't discussed what comes after. It was the conversation they'd been avoiding. Their relationship remained undefined, complicated by 2 decades of separation and the whirlwind of current circumstances. What do you want to happen? Jonathan asked carefully. Emily looked back at their children. I want us to be a family, whatever that means. Sarah needs stability. Michael needs both parents. And I. And you? Jonathan prompted when she hesitated. I need time to heal completely, to understand who we are to each other now, not who we were 20 years ago. Jonathan nodded, relieved she wasn't suggesting separation. We have time now. That's what matters. Their moment was interrupted by the security system's alert. Jonathan checked the notification, his expression darkening. Richard? Emily guessed. Yes. With lawyers. Jonathan stood. Stay with the children. As he headed to meet his father, Jonathan steeled himself for another battle, unaware that Richard Hayes had discovered the medical breakthrough and was prepared to use it as his most powerful leverage yet. A medical miracle worth billions, Richard Hayes declared, settling uninvited into Jonathan's study. And you plan to keep it from me? Jonathan remained standing, maintaining the physical advantage. Emily's recovery is not a corporate asset, Father. Richard waved dismissively. Everything is an asset when properly leveraged. Michael's stem cells represent the most significant cancer breakthrough in decades. Hayes Pharmaceuticals could dominate oncology treatments worldwide. Michael is a child, not a lab specimen, Jonathan replied coldly, and I've already removed you from operational control of Hayes Industries. Richard's smile was predatory. The board might reconsider when they understand the financial implications. Your duty to shareholders. My duty is to my family, Jonathan interrupted. Something you've never understood. Family? Richard scoffed. A woman you haven't seen in 20 years and her children? I'm your family, Jonathan. I built everything you have. And manipulated everything I've lost, Jonathan countered. No more. Whatever Emily and Michael's condition might mean for medical science will be handled ethically, with their welfare as the priority. Richard studied his son with calculating eyes. You've always been idealistic, impractical. It's why you needed my guidance. Guidance, Jonathan laughed bitterly. You intercepted Emily's letters, kept me from my daughter for 9 years, and now want to exploit my infant son for corporate profit. That's not guidance. It's control. And it ends today. Richard's expression hardened. Nothing ends today. My attorneys have already filed for emergency guardianship of Michael on grounds of medical necessity. As his biological grandfather, I have standing to ensure his unique medical value is properly managed. Jonathan felt cold fury rising. Get out, now. You'll receive the court papers tomorrow, Richard continued, rising unhurriedly. I suggest you explain to Emily that cooperation would be simpler for everyone. After Richard departed, Jonathan immediately called his legal team, instructing them to prepare for battle. Then he returned to Emily and the children, his expression grim. "He knows about Michael's medical significance," Jonathan explained, keeping his voice low as the children played nearby. "He's filing for guardianship." Emily's face paled. "Can he do that?" "He'll try, but we have advantages. Biological parentage, my resources, your improving health." Jonathan took her hands. "I won't let him take our son, Emily, I promise." For the next week, their lives centered around legal preparations. Dr. Abernathy and his team documented Emily's improvement and Michael's well-being, creating medical records that would support keeping the family together. Jonathan's attorneys prepared arguments against Richard's claims of medical necessity for separating Michael from his parents. Throughout the gathering storm, Sarah remained their emotional anchor, her resilience inspiring the adults around her. She continued her schoolwork, helped care for Michael, and maintained a determined optimism about the future. "We're going to win," she stated matter-of-factly one evening, "because we're right and Grandpa is wrong." And the morning of the emergency hearing arrived with unexpected developments. As they prepared to leave for court, Dr. Abernathy arrived with breaking news. "The latest scans are remarkable," he announced, showing them images on his tablet. "Emily, you're showing signs of complete remission in your liver and significant reduction in all other tumor sites." "That's impossible," Emily whispered. "The metastases were extensive just weeks ago." "Impossible but happening," Dr. Abernathy confirmed. "Whatever mechanism is at work, it's exceeding all medical expectations." Jonathan recognized the strategic importance of this timing. "We need these results certified immediately for today's hearing." Dr. Abernathy nodded. "Already done. I've brought affidavits from 3 independent oncologists confirming the findings." The courtroom was crowded when they arrived. Richard had ensured media coverage, though the judge had ordered proceedings closed to cameras. Jonathan and Emily sat with their attorneys, while Richard and his legal team occupied the opposite table. The judge, an experienced family court veteran named Judge Martha Winslow, reviewed the filings with a carefully neutral expression. "Before we begin," Judge Winslow announced, "I want to be clear about the scope of today's hearing. We are determining if emergency guardianship of the minor child Michael Carter is warranted on medical grounds. This is not about corporate interests or scientific potential, but the welfare of a child." Richard's lead attorney rose. "Your Honor, the child's unique medical status creates extraordinary circumstances. His cells contain properties with life-saving potential for thousands of cancer patients. The public interest in properly managing this resource—" "The child is not a resource," Judge Winslow interrupted sharply. "He is a 10-month-old boy. Proceed accordingly." Jonathan's attorney presented Dr. Abernathy's findings, demonstrating that Michael's presence with his mother was actually contributing to her recovery, making separation potentially harmful to both. As legal arguments continued, Jonathan watched Richard's face, recognizing the calculated adjustments as his father realized the hearing wasn't proceeding as planned. The elder Hayes leaned frequently to whisper to his attorneys, clearly changing tactics as evidence mounted against him. When Judge Winslow called a brief recess, Richard approached Jonathan in the hallway. "This doesn't end here," he stated quietly. "One hearing, one judge. These are minor obstacles." "Why can't you accept that you've lost?" Jonathan asked wearily. "For once, put family before control." Richard's eyes narrowed. "Family is control, Jonathan. The sooner you accept that, the sooner we can work together again." "We're never working together again," Jonathan replied. "You've made that impossible." Judge Winslow's ruling was unequivocal. She denied Richard's petition for emergency guardianship, citing the transparent attempt to use family court to achieve corporate objectives, and ordering Richard to pay Jonathan and Emily's legal fees. More significantly, she granted a temporary restraining order, preventing Richard from approaching either child without parental consent. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions as Jonathan and Emily navigated to their waiting car, security creating a protective barrier around them. Is it true Michael's cells are curing cancer? Dr. Carter, how has your condition improved? Mr. Hayes, will Hayes Industries develop a treatment based on your son's cells? They maintained silence until safely inside the vehicle, Emily exhaling with relief as they pulled away from the media scrum. I hate this attention, she admitted. Michael deserves privacy, not to be famous as some miracle baby. Jonathan nodded in agreement. We'll need a strategy for managing the medical interest without exposing the children. I've been thinking about that, Emily said. What if we established a research foundation? Something separate from Hayes Industries, but with enough funding to pursue the science properly. Jonathan considered this. An independent foundation would have more credibility and less appearance of corporate self-interest. They continued discussing possibilities during the drive home, both aware that Richard's defeat in court was merely round one in what could become a protracted battle. At the estate, they found Sarah conducting what appeared to be a science lesson for Michael, showing him pictures from her textbook while he batted happily at the pages. I'm teaching Michael about cells, she explained seriously. Since his are special, he should understand how they work. Emily laughed, a full, joyous sound that Jonathan realized he hadn't heard since their reunion. He's a bit young for cytology, sweetheart. I'm starting basic, Sarah defended. Besides, Mrs. Reynolds says understanding things makes them less scary. Mrs. Reynolds, Sarah's school counselor, had been helping her process the whirlwind changes in her life. The girl's resilience was remarkable, but the adults recognized she needed support navigating her new reality. We won the court thing, Sarah stated, clearly having overheard security's radio communication. Does that mean Grandpa can't take Michael away? Jonathan sat beside his daughter. Yes, the judge said Michael stays with us, where he belongs. Sarah nodded, satisfied. Good, because I have plans for teaching him lots of things when he gets older. That evening, after the children were asleep, Jonathan and Emily sat in the garden, enjoying the first moment of true peace they'd experienced in weeks. What happens now? Emily asked softly. Now we build something new, Jonathan replied. The foundation you suggested, I think we should call it the Sarah Initiative. Focus on maternal fetal cell research. Emily smiled. Sarah would love having something named after her, though she'd insist Michael deserves credit too. The Sarah and Michael Initiative then, Jonathan amended, but beyond the research I meant us, what we build as a family. Emily turned to face him directly. Jonathan, I need to be clear about something. I won't be a charity case. As my health improves, I need independence, purpose beyond being the miracle patient, or even just the children's mother. What did you envision doing before all this? Jonathan asked. I was an English professor before the cancer, Emily reminded him. I loved teaching. During treatment, I've been writing a novel, something to leave for the children originally. Now, maybe something I could actually publish. Jonathan's respect for her deepened further. Even facing death, she had been creating rather than surrendering. The guest house on the east property, he suggested. We could convert it into your writing space, close enough for the children, but separate enough for your independence. Emily considered this. And us? What are we to each other now, Jonathan? It was the question they'd been circling for weeks, too consumed with crises to define their relationship. We're partners, Jonathan answered carefully. Parents, friends, and maybe in time something more again, but only if and when you're ready. Emily smiled, reaching for his hand. Partners, she agreed. For now, that's enough. Their moment of connection was interrupted by the security system's alert. Jonathan checked his phone, frowning at the notification. "What now?" Emily asked. "An email from my father's attorney," Jonathan replied, scanning the message. "He's calling an emergency board meeting tomorrow. Apparently, he's found a bylaw that might let him regain control of Hayes Industries." Emily's expression hardened. "He never stops, does he?" "No," Jonathan admitted, "but neither do we." The next morning brought unexpected clarity to Jonathan. After a night of reviewing corporate bylaws and consulting with his attorneys, he recognized that his father's threatened takeover attempt was legally tenuous, but would create months of disruptive litigation. Hayes Industries would suffer, shareholders would lose value, and most importantly, his family would remain under siege. Over breakfast, he shared his decision with Emily. "I'm going to offer him a deal," Jonathan explained. "Full control of Hayes Industries in exchange for his complete withdrawal from our lives, legally binding, with financial penalties for any violation." Emily looked shocked. "You'd give up your company? Jonathan, you've built it into what it is today." "I built it on my father's foundation," Jonathan corrected. "Which means it will always carry his influence. I'd rather start something new, something ours." Sarah, listening quietly while feeding Michael his breakfast, asked the practical question, "If you don't have your company, how will we buy food and stuff?" Jonathan smiled at her concern. "My Hayes Industries shares are worth billions, Sarah. I'd sell them to my father as part of the agreement. We'd have plenty for food and stuff for many lifetimes." Sarah nodded, satisfied with this explanation. "So you'd make a new company. What would you make?" It was a child's question that crystallized Jonathan's evolving vision. Not just a company. A foundation focused on medical research, educational initiatives, maybe even sustainable technology. Something that helps people. Emily watched him with growing admiration. "You've been thinking about this for a while, haven't you?" "Since finding you and the children," Jonathan admitted. Hayes Industries was built on profit first, with philanthropy as an afterthought. I want to build something where doing good is the primary objective. The board meeting was scheduled for noon. Jonathan arrived early, meeting privately with key directors whose support he'd need for his proposal. By the time Richard strode in, confidence radiating from his immaculate appearance, Jonathan had secured the necessary allies. "Before we begin," Jonathan announced as the meeting commenced, "I have a proposal that may resolve our ongoing governance disputes." Richard's eyebrows rose slightly, the only indication of surprise he allowed himself. Jonathan outlined his offer. Richard would regain full control of Hayes Industries, purchasing Jonathan's shares at a 10% premium to market value. In exchange, Richard would sign irrevocable legal agreements renouncing any claims regarding Emily or the children, with significant financial penalties for violation. "You're surrendering," Richard stated, unable to hide his satisfaction. "I'm choosing," Jonathan corrected, "family over legacy, the choice you never made." The board members watched this exchange with varying degrees of discomfort and fascination. After a brief executive session without either Hayes present, they unanimously approved the framework, pending final legal documentation. As the meeting concluded, Richard approached his son. "You realize you're throwing away generations of work," he said quietly. "No," Jonathan replied. "I'm honoring what matters most. Something you taught me by negative example." For perhaps the first time, Jonathan saw genuine confusion in his father's eyes, an inability to comprehend prioritizing people over power. It confirmed he was making the right choice. Legal teams worked through the weekend finalizing the complex agreement. When Jonathan signed the final documents in his home office Monday morning, Emily by his side, he felt no regret, only liberation. "It's done," he announced, setting down his pen. "Hayes Industries belongs to my father, and we belong to ourselves." Emily squeezed his hand. "Are you sure about this?" Ooh, more certain than I've ever been about anything, Jonathan assured her. Besides, we have work to do. That afternoon, they gathered the household staff to announce changes. The estate would remain their home, but Jonathan's focus would shift to establishing the Sarah and Michael initiative, with Emily serving as co-director once her health permitted. "I'm really going to have something named after me?" Sarah asked, wide-eyed with surprise. "Something important," Jonathan confirmed. "A foundation that will help children and families facing medical challenges like the ones we've overcome." Sarah considered this seriously. Michael's name should be first since his cells are doing the helping. "The Michael and Sarah Initiative it is," Emily laughed, hugging her daughter. As word spread about Jonathan's departure from Hayes Industries, media attention intensified. Speculation about his reasons ranged from family drama to health concerns to corporate disputes. Rather than hide from the attention, Jonathan decided to address it directly. In a carefully coordinated interview with a respected medical journal, Dr. Abernathy published the first scientific paper documenting Emily's remarkable recovery, with appropriate privacy protections for the family. Simultaneously, Jonathan announced the formation of the Michael and Sarah Initiative, with initial funding of $1 billion for research into maternal-fetal cellular exchange mechanisms and potential cancer treatments. The combined announcements shifted the narrative dramatically. Rather than scandal or corporate intrigue, the story became one of scientific breakthrough and philanthropic vision. Even Richard could find no angle to undermine what was rapidly becoming a positive public relations phenomenon. 3 months after the court hearing, Emily received the news they'd been hoping for: complete remission. Her oncologist, still marveling at the unprecedented recovery, recommended continued monitoring, but declared no active cancer cells detectable in her body. That evening, they celebrated with a family dinner in the garden, the first truly carefree meal they'd shared since finding each other. As Jonathan watched Emily laughing with Sarah, while Michael attempted to feed himself with more enthusiasm than accuracy, he felt a completeness he'd never known possible. 1 year after Sarah appeared on Jonathan's doorstep, the Michael and Sarah Initiative had grown into a respected research foundation with laboratories in Boston, Stockholm, and Tokyo. Emily, now fully recovered and serving as communications director, had published her novel to critical acclaim. Jonathan, as foundation president, divided his time between strategic planning and, more importantly, being present for his children. Sarah, now 10, had blossomed into a confident 5th grader who excelled academically and had begun to show genuine leadership qualities. Michael, at 22 months, was a toddling whirlwind of energy whose vocabulary grew daily and whose cells continued to be studied for their unique properties. Richard Hayes maintained rigorous compliance with the legal agreement, focusing entirely on expanding Hayes Industries while avoiding any contact with Jonathan's family. Occasionally, news of his father's business triumphs or healthcare innovations reached Jonathan, producing complicated emotions: pride in the good being accomplished, regret for the relationship that could have been. On a crisp autumn morning, as Jonathan helped Sarah with a science project on the terrace, Emily approached with an expression he couldn't quite read. "There's something we need to discuss," she said, glancing meaningfully at Sarah. "Adult things." Sarah rolled her eyes with preteen sophistication. "You can just say you need privacy, Mom." "I'm not a baby." "Very mature," Emily agreed, smiling. "Could you check on Michael? He should be waking from his nap." When Sarah had gone, Emily sat beside Jonathan, hands clasped nervously in her lap. "What's wrong?" Jonathan asked, immediately concerned. "Is it the cancer?" "No, nothing like that," Emily assured him quickly. "My last scan was clear. It's about us." Over the past year, their relationship had evolved into a comfortable partnership. They functioned seamlessly as co-parents and foundation colleagues, maintaining separate bedrooms while sharing family meals and activities. Both had been careful not to pressure the other about defining their personal relationship further. "I've been thinking," Emily continued when Jonathan remained silent. "We've built this wonderful life, this family. The children are thriving. The foundation is doing important work. But," Jonathan prompted gently. "But we're in limbo, you and I," Emily said directly, "neither completely together nor completely apart. And I wonder if that's fair to either of us." Jonathan felt his heart constrict with sudden fear. Was she planning to leave? Had he misread their growing closeness? "What are you suggesting?" he asked carefully. Emily reached for his hand. "I'm suggesting that after a year of rebuilding trust, healing old wounds, and creating something beautiful together, maybe it's time to decide what we want for ourselves, not just for the children or the foundation." "And what do you want, Emily?" Jonathan asked, scarcely breathing as he awaited her answer. "I want to stop pretending I'm not still in love with you," she replied simply. "I want to stop acting as though we're just co-parents and colleagues, when every day I find more reasons to love the man you've become." Relief and joy flooded through him. "I've wanted to tell you the same thing for months. I just didn't want to pressure you." "Well, we've both been very considerate and completely ridiculous," Emily laughed. "So what do we do about it?" Jonathan had prepared for this moment without knowing when it might come. From his pocket, he withdrew a small box that had accompanied him daily for months. "This isn't the grand romantic gesture you deserve," he said, opening the box to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. "But it is a promise to love you and our children every day, to build our future together, and to never again let anything separate us." Emily's eyes filled with tears as she looked from the ring to Jonathan's face. "Are you proposing? Because if you are, you should probably actually ask the question." Jonathan laughed, dropping to one knee despite the informal setting. "Emily Carter, will you marry me? Not because of our history or our children or any obligation, but because I love you more today than I ever thought possible." "Yes," she replied without hesitation. "Absolutely yes." Their kiss was interrupted by a squeal from the doorway. Sarah stood there, holding Michael's hand as he toddled beside her. "Are you getting married?" Sarah demanded, her expression a mix of excitement and uncertainty. "If that's okay with you," Jonathan replied, suddenly realizing they should have consulted the children first. Sarah considered this momentous question for approximately 3 seconds before breaking into a wide grin. "Does this mean I can call you Dad now? For real?" "I would be honored," Jonathan replied, emotion thick in his voice. "And we all have the same last name," Sarah continued practically. "Hayes Carter, maybe," Emily suggested. "Or Carter Hayes. We'll figure it out." Sarah nodded, apparently satisfied with these answers. "Michael and I vote yes. Right, Michael?" "Yes," Michael echoed enthusiastically, though likely without understanding the question. As they gathered in a family embrace, Jonathan reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment, from a storm-drenched doorstep to a future brighter than any he could have imagined. The wedding was intimate but joyful, held in the estate's garden with only close friends, foundation colleagues, and the children in attendance. Sarah served as Emily's maid of honor, solemnly walking ahead of her mother down the petal-strewn aisle. Michael, as ring-bearer, required Jonathan's research assistant Amy to guide him, but managed to deliver the rings without eating or losing them, a success by toddler standards. Dr. Abernathy, who had become a dear friend, gave Emily away. When the minister asked, "Who gives this woman?" he answered, with heartfelt simplicity, "Her children and those whose lives she's saved." The reception continued into evening, with Sarah delivering a carefully rehearsed toast that left few dry eyes among the guests. 1 year, 3 months, and 14 days ago, she began with characteristic precision. I was really scared. Mum was sick, Michael was hungry, and it was storming really bad. I decided to be brave and knock on a door to ask for help. She paused, looking between Emily and Jonathan. I didn't know I was knocking on my dad's door. I didn't know Michael's cells would help heal Mum. I didn't know we'd become a real family. But now we are, and I'm not scared anymore. She raised her sparkling cider. To Mum and Dad, thanks for finding each other again. As guests departed and the children were put to bed, Jonathan and Emily found themselves alone on the terrace, stars emerging in the clear night sky. Mrs. Hayes Carter, Jonathan said, testing the name they'd decided upon. How does it feel? Surreal, Emily admitted. 2 years ago, I was preparing to die. Now I'm healthy, married to the love of my life, watching our children thrive. It doesn't seem possible. Yet here we are, Jonathan murmured, drawing her close. Their peaceful moment was interrupted by Jonathan's phone. Few people had this private number, making late calls significant. He checked the screen, surprised to see his executive assistant's name. Rebecca? Is everything all right? He answered. I'm sorry to disturb you, especially today, Rebecca replied, her voice unusually tense. But there's been an incident involving your father. The hospital called because you're still listed as his emergency contact. Jonathan felt Emily's questioning gaze as he listened to the details. Richard Hayes had suffered a major stroke while working late at Hayes Industries headquarters. He was currently stable but unconscious at Massachusetts General Hospital. After ending the call, Jonathan explained the situation to Emily. You should go, she said without hesitation. Whatever he's done, he's still your father. It's our wedding night, Jonathan protested weakly. Emily touched his cheek gently. We have a lifetime of nights ahead. Go. At the hospital, Jonathan found Richard in intensive care, surrounded by monitoring equipment. The attending physician explained that while the stroke had been severe, brain activity remained strong. Recovery was possible but uncertain. Jonathan sat beside his father's bed, studying the suddenly vulnerable man who had shaped so much of his life, for better and worse. Despite everything, seeing Richard reduced to this state brought unexpected grief. A nurse appeared with a plastic bag containing Richard's personal effects. We found these in his pocket, she explained. The photos might be important to family. Curious, Jonathan examined the contents. Among business cards and keys was a worn photograph he'd never seen before, himself as a newborn, cradled in his mother's arms, while Richard looked on with uncharacteristic tenderness. On the back, in his father's precise handwriting, everything changes today. The second photo was even more surprising. A newspaper clipping about the Michael and Sarah Initiative's breakthrough cancer research, with Jonathan and Emily in the accompanying photo. It had been carefully preserved, not crumpled or defaced, as might be expected if kept for vengeful purposes. These glimpses into his father's private sentiments complicated Jonathan's understanding of the man. Had there been pride alongside the control? Love beneath the manipulation? Jonathan remained until dawn, when Richard briefly regained consciousness. Recognition flickered in the older man's eyes, followed by what appeared to be surprise that Jonathan was present. The children, Richard managed, his speech slurred but comprehensible. Sarah and Michael are fine, Jonathan replied, assuming his father was asking about their welfare. Richard shook his head slightly, clearly frustrated by his limited communication ability. With visible effort, he tried again. Proud of them. The simple statement, perhaps the closest thing to approval Richard Hayes had ever offered, left Jonathan momentarily speechless. Thank you, he finally responded. They're remarkable children. Richard's eyes drifted closed again, but his hand moved slightly toward Jonathan. After a moment's hesitation, Jonathan took it, feeling the weak pressure of his father's fingers. When he returned home, Jonathan found Emily waiting in the kitchen, coffee prepared. "How is he?" she asked. "Physically stable but significant damage," Jonathan replied. "The doctors aren't certain about long-term prognosis." Emily studied his troubled expression. "There's something else." Jonathan showed her the photographs, explaining Richard's unexpected words. "I've spent years believing he was incapable of genuine love or pride. Now I don't know what to think. People are complicated," Emily said gently, "even Richard Hayes." Over the following weeks, as they settled into married life, Jonathan visited his father regularly. Richard's recovery progressed slowly, speech therapy and physical rehabilitation producing incremental improvements. Communication remained limited, but Richard seemed to appreciate updates about the children, particularly Michael's development and Sarah's academic achievements. During one visit, Richard's speech therapist encouraged Jonathan to bring family photos, suggesting they might motivate recovery. Though hesitant to expose his family to potential manipulation, Jonathan consulted with Emily, who made a surprising suggestion. "Ask Sarah what she thinks," Emily advised. "She's old enough to have a voice in this." Sarah, after careful consideration, decided to accompany Jonathan on his next hospital visit, bringing artwork she'd created specifically for her grandfather. "People can change," she declared with characteristic certainty. "Maybe being sick will help him be nicer." The visit proved transformative. Richard, seeing his granddaughter in person for the first time since the court battle, showed more animation than he had in weeks. Sarah, initially cautious, gradually warmed to the role of storyteller, describing her school projects and Michael's latest antics with infectious enthusiasm. Before leaving, she placed her drawing on Richard's bedside table, a carefully rendered family tree, including a branch labeled Grandpa Richard with a question mark beside it. "That's for you to decide," she told him seriously. "If you want to be part of our family, you have to be nice. Those are the rules." As Jonathan and Sarah departed, the nurse whispered that she'd never seen Richard so engaged in his therapy. Driving home, Jonathan asked Sarah her impressions of the man she'd known only as an adversary. "He looks sad," she replied after thoughtful consideration. "Not just sick sad, inside sad, like he missed a lot of important things." Out of the mouths of babes, Jonathan thought, marveling at his daughter's perceptiveness. That evening, as he recounted Sarah's observations to Emily while they prepared dinner together, Jonathan realized how completely his perspective had shifted in just 18 months. "A year and a half ago, I was alone in this house, consumed with Hayes Industries, and had no idea you or Sarah existed," he reflected. "Now we're married with 2 children, running a foundation that's helping thousands, and I'm contemplating reconciliation with my father." Emily smiled, passing him vegetables to chop. "Life rarely follows the expected path. Sometimes it offers something much better than we could have planned." As if to punctuate her point, Sarah's voice called from the family room, where she was ostensibly supervising Michael. "Mom! Dad! Michael just said microscope!" Nay, they rushed to witness this unlikely linguistic achievement, finding Michael happily repeating scope while pointing to pictures in Sarah's science book. "Close enough," Sarah declared proudly. "He's definitely going to be a scientist." Watching his children, the daughter who had appeared on his doorstep during a storm, and the son whose existence had seemed impossible, Jonathan felt profound gratitude for the path that had led them here. Whatever came next, Richard's recovery, the foundation's work, their evolving family dynamics, they would face it together, bound by love that had persisted through 20 years of separation and emerged stronger for the journey. As Emily often reminded him, quoting from her novel, The eyes of yesterday may glimpse what was lost, but the heart recognizes what was always meant to be